This one's gonna be really good. I can already feel it. Why am I saying that though? What's good, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I really just wanted to talk about the books that I plan to read in March. I've already started on this set, but I want to bring you guys some books that you have literally never heard of before, because I literally never heard of them. And if I didn't hear of them, I sure as hell know you haven't heard of them at all. These are books that have been under the radar for a while. And I did it, once again, a little differently. You know how we do it on this channel. We twist it just a little bit. So, in addition to sharing my thoughts about the books that I wanted to read, I thought, okay, well, how about I read the first 10 minutes of it and then tell you my initial thoughts after the first 10 minutes of reading the book to see if I really do like it or how I'm feeling about it in general. And that might give you a better color on what the book is about, etc. With an additional twist, I read it while walking on a treadmill because I couldn't stand to just sit here and read, and I feel like I needed to do something while I read, so I decided to walk. And you'll see all of that coming up here soon. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and let me know your thoughts on it at the end. We are going to start by talking about Divine Summons by Rebecca P. Minor. This is a book that I picked up from the bookstore in King of Prussia Mall. It's called Bookish. The store is called Bookish, and I believe Rebecca P. Minor is one of the owners. She's a wife of the owner that I met when I was there. And so this is one of her books, Divine Summons, part of the Wind Rider Saga Book 1. As you can see, this book is pretty thin, it's pretty small, it's about 148 pages. So I did kind of already finish this book, but I am going to tell you what I thought initially when I first read it, because I do take notes because I am neurotic about these things for some reason. And so I'll just share what I thought about the first couple of chapters, right? So my first chapter thoughts written verbatim is, it's okay. A bit over urgent, but makes sense. Language is airy, it's lacking something, but I'm unsure of what. It's a first person point of view. So you have this elf. It's basically a story that takes place between elves, dragonkin, which are some sort of warped descendant version of dragons, and the elves are the good people in this book, and the dragonkin are the bad people in this book, setting the scene. So you have the elf Vinyanel, who is hurriedly on horseback, running away, having stolen the chalice of whatever the fuck from the dragonkin, and is trying to take it back to the kingdom. And along the way, they're catching up on him. He can't outrun them. His horse breaks his leg, etc. And then he comes across into a cave where he meets the half-elf Varana. And Varana tells him that she has been sent or instructed by the creator Creo, that she is supposed to have met him. She's supposed to guide him in the ways of being a wind rider, which is a dragon rider essentially, and is supposed to like do this whole like big thing, etc. Whatever his new fate, he's made for better things, etc. All that stuff, right? Right off the back, it's already like, what the fuck is happening? They're still getting chased. They go further into the cave where he first met Varana, and then they stumble upon this big area with like, a hole in the top. And then he meets the dragon. The dragon's name is Magistrin or Magestrin. Basically magistry, like majesty, all this like weird, root word nonsense. His name is Magistrin, right? Or Magestrin. I don't know how they pronounce it. I keep going back and forth on the two. I don't know. Regardless, Magistrin is there to take Vinyanel and Varana and escape from the dragonkin, etc. And so it's like you're already dropped into this weird chosen one fate. Fate has other plans for you, stumble upon fate type thing, and it's like, does this really make sense? I think that that's where I felt like something there's background, backstory, lore, some sort of element that felt missing while I was reading the entire story. It gets better, but that's just how I felt at the beginning of the book, because I was literally chapter 1. So I will share my thoughts with you about this book at the end of the month, so come back for that video. But those are my first thoughts on Divine Summons Book 1. Another book that I picked up from Bookish KOP. And this is, I think, Seth Ring's debut novel. Seth Ring is apparently a local Pennsylvanian author. And he wrote Battlemage Farmer, Book 1, Domestication. And just a little bit of background, when I was talking to the owner of Bookish, they try to highlight books from local authors as well. And I believe Seth Ring was one. Um, and so I was interested in a different book of his that's on this stack down here that you can't see, but I also picked up this one because I heard it was one of his like more popular ones, or it was his first one, something like that. Battlemage Farmer Domestication. This one's gonna be really good. I can already feel it. Why am I saying that though? It's essentially an isekai. That's literally it. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, in the manga world, in the Japanese manga world, isekai means other world. It's usually a trope to describe the scenario where somebody from like Earth or the real world gets pulled into this other world, summoned into this other world, and now they're in like a fantasy world, maybe a video game world, and all this stuff, right? They have a stat window, all that stuff. It's called isekaiing. So you have a character that's been isekai'd into this world, and he, from the first 10 minutes, right? So this one I read about 2 chapters in, 15 pages. There was no prologue. And it's essentially this guy John Sutton gets isekai'd into this world, and he's given this quest that, you are a mage, you have one spell, and your quest is to retire. His lore is funny. It's, you've been discharged with high honors by the Royal Leperian Army and granted a deed to a small farm in the Robane Mountains at the frontier village of Fairford. Speak to the village elder to claim your land. That's his first quest, it's just to fucking retire. No battle quest, no none of that bullshit, right? So this is already really interesting, and what I find interesting is Seth Ring writes his books like you would be reading a manga or manhwa, so it'll talk about the stat window, and it'll show you the stat window, it'll show you what it says in the stat window, so it's kind of like you're reading that type of book. I like it so far. It's quippy, it's lighthearted, it's not super serious, it's not a very serious tone at all. So I really like it so far, just from the first 2 chapters I read, because when I read this, I was like, oh, it's one of those books. It's right up my fucking alley. That is Battlemage Farmer, Book 1, Domestication. And yet another book that I picked up from Bookish KOP, not sponsored by the way. This is The Color of Dragons by R.A. Salvatore and Erica Lewis. This is interesting. It's fantasy, duh. But the story starts off prologue and into the first chapter. I didn't even finish the first chapter. I think I got like 15 pages in or so. The story is essentially years after, like years or decades or a long time after, you have this rebellion, this revolution, and a new king takes place, right? The new king builds a castle, the new king builds castle walls. And so now it's like, oh, everything that happens within the castle walls is all like royalty, majesty, upper class stuff. And then whatever happens outside of the walls is like poor people, all this stuff, right? It's basically separating the two classes. And then they've outlawed a lot of things, right? They've outlawed holding weapons. They've outlawed a lot of things. And so the book starts off where you have this first person POV of this young woman, I think in her teens. Her name is Maggie, and she is having to escape the periodic, what's it called? The periodic investigations of the royal army, because they go to every like town, whatever it is, and investigate or scope out, or what do they call it? I call it collecting taxes. And they'll like pillage things along the way. They'll take women, they'll take weaponry, they'll take all that stuff, right? Maggie is on the road with her companion, who is this old guy who does like magic tricks. So Maggie is his like assistant. And he says, okay, Maggie, go hide, go take the long route to the town. I'll meet you at the town, because they hear the hoofbeats of the army men coming down the road, etc. So she's running, she's hiding, etc. She stumbles upon this gathering of army men, and they've captured a Drakenok. A Drakenok is some form of dragon beast, and they've captured it. Okay, cool. She sees them abusing it. She sees them, whatever it is, and they run away. And per usual, a fated person says what? I feel like I need, like, something's calling to me. I need to go witness this in person. And she gets closer to the cage. She somehow touches the claw of the Dragnok, and it shows this entire dragon bonding scene of, like, it's so she's now bonded with this Dragnok, and we don't know why, we don't know how. That's what happened, and then she gets caught. She tries to run away, and she gets, caught and surrounded, and that's kind of where I stopped after the 10 minutes. So I'm actually decently intrigued because they set enough of the history and the scene and the lore that I know what's going on, to where I can just, like, now be along for the ride. Versus Divine Summons was a little bit weird with that, a little bit off in terms of my opinion. This one did it really well at the beginning. I liked it, and I'm looking forward to continuing this one. This is probably the book that I'm looking forward to the most. This is Forge Master by Seth Ring, a Nova Terra series, Tower Book 1. And on the cover, I'll show you, it has, it looks like a huge man who's forging a blade with, like, a three-tailed, raccoon tanuki looking thing over his shoulder. This one's fucking sick, okay? So this is, like, this whole magic, like, huge fantasy, like, setting. It's not an isekai like the first one, like the other one I told you about. This is a whole fantasy setting, right? I'm just gonna tell you what my notes are instead of, like, trying to remember what I read, because I think it's just easier that way. So there's a lower and upper worlds dimension split. The upper world was cut off from the lower world in the past in order to prevent lower beings from ascending into upper worlds. Worlds need a world spirit in order to function with mana and possibly ascend. That's all we gathered from the prologue. Then, from chapter 1, Thorn is an 8-foot giant genius who had somehow befriended or attained the world spirit Eve in the lower world Angeril, and has somehow become proficient in a ton of things, mainly earth magic, earth mana. He's an earth master. And he had become proficient in a ton of things in order to achieve ascension. Thorn ascended with a three-tailed tanuki, Akira, and a large dark wolf, Hati. Eve, the world spirit, speaks into his mind, and in this new world, Thorn sees stat windows and other titles like an RPG, and I'm so fucking intrigued with this. I need more ASAP. I only got 13 pages in. And I think this is really fucking dope, because the way that Seth does this is really cool, because when he has this, like, whole ascension thing, and now Eve, the world spirit, is speaking in his brain and saying, initializing yourself in new world, analyzing environment. Once analysis is complete, stats will be allocated accordingly, and titles as well. And so it kind of shows, like, all the stats that he has, like the titles and all that stuff. So it's really cool. Like, he has abilities, background tags, right? Legendary monster hunter, hero of the people, ruler of Angeril, genius earth mage, forge master, right? His name is Thorn. His race is a titan. He's a void forger. All this stuff. Like, he has stat points and everything. Oh, it's gonna be so good. It's gonna be so good. I know for a fact Seth Ring is not gonna disappoint me, because if he does, I will cry on camera. But I don't think I will. I'm just looking forward to this so much. All right, let's get into a couple of the bigger books that I don't actually know if I'll be able to finish this month, but I'm starting them this month. The next one is Bane of Asgard by Cinda Williams-Chima. This was on my list of books to read that I made, or list of 2025 books that I need to read that I made back in January. This is book 2 to the Runestone Saga. Book 1 is Children of Ragnarok over here. This is Cinda Williams-Chima's young adult Norse-inspired fantasy series. And this is her foray into Norse mythology. I made a whole video on Children of Ragnarok called an archive review, and you can check it out separately. I made a whole big, like, long review on it as well on Goodreads and shit. The way I thought about Children of Ragnarok initially was, it's nothing like her other books. It's not as casual, lighthearted, quippy, chill, like, funny as Air Chronicles, Seven Realms, Shattered Realms. Like, it's not like those. And it sort of took me out of her element, because it was trying to be much more serious, much more fantasy, much more, like, to the lore, to the specifics, etc. And I didn't love that as much, and I still kind of don't. Now, that book came out in 2022, and I'm reading this now in 2025. I don't remember all the details that happened in the first book, and so getting into it was really, really hard. I feel like I should have read that book again. Maybe I should have read my review. I remember my review, I just don't remember all the details that happened in the book. Catching up was a huge mental burden. And I still can't get over the fact that she's trying to use like Norse mythological language. I talked about it in my first video where I thought it was initially interesting but hard to get into, where she replaces a lot of English words with what they would be said in like I think it's Scandinavian spelling of it. Not sure. Sorry if I messed that up. But like father is, instead of father, it's fader, right? Fader. Instead of brother, it's brother or brodir, Brodir. Sister, Sirtir. Mother, Modir. It's just really hard when you get to those words and you're like using English the entire way, then you switch the spelling to be a different culture for like a word at a time. It was really hard for me to get back into, essentially is what I'm saying. That was the only like pitfall that I'm having with this book. I'm enjoying reading through it, but I'm getting through it very, very slowly. This is more akin to like an epic fantasy than it is like one of her regular like fantasy novels that aren't as epic, like on terms of like a scale. So I think it's gonna take me some time to get through this book. I don't think it's bad. I've never encountered a bad Cinda Williams Chima book. I just don't think, for me, this is up there with the other three for me thus far. All right, first of all, if you have not watched the most recent video, which is my all the books I read in February video, where I'm speed dating the different books and telling you my thoughts, you should go watch that first, or go watch the Divine Rivals portion of that first and then come back to this, because we are reading Ruthless Vows, which is the second book in that little story by Rebecca Ross. Okay? Divine Rivals was great. Objectively and subjectively, Divine Rivals was actually amazing. And so when I was at Target, I was like, oh, I see Ruthless Vows here. I might as well buy that shit and read it because I just read Divine Rivals. Why wait? Ruthless Vows takes place 2 weeks after the ending of Divine Rivals. Iris and Addie are still working for the Tribune, and they're still, publishing whatever real things went on at the front lines. Roman is like unaccounted for based on what I've read in the first like 13, 15 pages. There is like, I believe she's still living with her brother Forrest. There's still a little bit of like unease between the two of them with how things went with the end of Divine Rivals. Iris thinks there's somebody following her, but she doesn't know who. And at the end of the chapter, I finished the first chapter, she gets back to her apartment from the first day. Oh, even before that, Helena is asked Addie and Iris to go back onto the front lines to keep reporting on what's happening, because the Chancellor has just come in and said, listen, I think you're fear-mongering and posting propaganda as your articles. It's not real. And so they think, okay, so he's on Dagger's side. Right when Iris gets back to her apartment, she sees the doors ajar. She walks in, and who seems to be Roman's dad says, where's my son? And that's where I left off. So I'm definitely going to be continuing this book. I'm actually pretty excited to continue reading it. I think this story is going to be like just as good as the other one. And so we'll just see what happens. I don't know what to expect, so we're just going to see what happens. Y'all don't see me talk about books like this much because I've begun to not enjoy books like this much. I just podcast instead. But I did pick up The 5 Types of Wealth by Sahil Bloom. The reason being that I only read specific people's books that I think are going to be of a benefit to me, right? I read Hidden Genius by Polina Marinova Pompliano back in 2023. Last year, I tried reading Ali Abdal's Feel Good Productivity. I didn't enjoy it as much. I actually didn't even finish reading it just because at the time, I just don't think it was what I wanted. But those two are still people that I look up to and that I have as like a slight role model figure. I also did buy Cody Sanchez's Main Street Millionaire, which I want to read and kind of study in terms of like business owner and buying businesses versus starting your own business, etc. That's kind of been her whole like contrarian take on things. But before I do anything else, I had to get Sahil Bloom's new book and read it, because Sahil Bloom did change the way I thought about my life and family by what is literally the first sentence in this book, which says, you will only see your parents 15 more times in your life. I wanted to read it and kind of go through it. And the way I do these is I actually do flag, highlight, underline, and notate these. These are books that I notate. I don't notate fantasy. I notate books like this. And so please enjoy the next section. That's how I like to notate these books, and so I hope you enjoyed that little section of the 5 Types of Wealth as I was reading it. And I don't think I'll talk about this book in terms of like anything on this channel. I may just post a talk about the review when I finish it on here, but I will talk about this more on my podcast channel. And there you have it. These are the books that I'm planning to read this month, at least start. Who knows if I'll finish all of them. It's going to be a busy month. But if you're interested in any of these books, let me know. If you read any of these books, let me know. And just let me know what you're reading. Let me know what you're reading this month, what you're planning to read, what you're looking into. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will talk to you guys later and have a great day.